Hi there and good afternoon. My name is Ben Hush and I serve as the Committee Director for the National Conference of State Legislatures Agriculture and Energy Committee, and I'm joined by Tamara Spielvogel, who serves as the Committee Director for NCSL's Environment Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on emerging energy technologies, what do they mean for supply, cost, the environment, and economies, co-hosted by both NCSL's Agriculture and Energy Committee and NCSL's Environment Committee. Today, our new energy technology focus will be on nuclear energy. As a reminder, today's webinar is the second in a three-part series of e-learning webinars that the Agriculture and Energy and Environment Committees are co-hosting. Our third and final webinar will be next Friday, July 20th, also at 3:30, focusing on recent regulatory action by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the related congressional response. Our first webinar, which was held 2 weeks ago on June 29th, focused on the 2012 Farm Bill. An audio copy of that webinar is available online. But back to nuclear energy. Today's webinar will feature two great presenters. Our first speaker, David Matthews, is the Director of the Division of New Reactor Licensing within the Office of New Reactors at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and will provide an update on some of the latest licensing approvals at the NRC. Our second speaker is Dr. Catherine Jackson. Dr. Jackson is the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Westinghouse Electric Company, and she will discuss small modular reactors, often referred to as SMRs, and their potential. As a reminder, we will hold a question and answer session after both presentations, but please feel free for those joining the web to use the chat box in the upper right part of your screen to submit any questions ahead of time. With that, the floor is yours, David.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. I think if you'll put my first slide up, yeah. I want to clarify before I start off what the distinction is for the purposes of my remarks between new and advanced reactors. These are terms of art we've developed in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to distinguish between the classes of reactors that have been not only offered to us for review, but have been that applicants have indicated they will be sending to us. New reactors generally refer to those large light water reactors of the type and technology that have been built in the United States for many years, although there's been some improvements in them, and we've gone to designs that have features that enhance their safety beyond those that are already operating. We are talking about, in the context of new reactors, large light water reactors with that, using that basic technology. Advanced reactors is a term we use to distinguish between our efforts at the new reactor level to a class of reactors that also include what will be referred to later, I'm sure, by Dr. Jackson as small modular reactors. Advanced reactors are those that are relying on technologies that take a step beyond the technologies that the NRC and the industry has been most familiar with dealing with for the past 40 years. So with that clarification, I'll turn to the next slide. In terms of an overview, I just wanted to mention that we've had for some time in place, it started in 1989, a regulatory process characterized as Part 52, which refers to that part of the Code of Federal Regulations where these regulations are found. And I'll use that terminology throughout as reflecting the licensing process that is being used today for evaluating the safety, security, environmental protection of reactor applications. That Part 52 has been recently demonstrated to result in a successful process insofar as the licensing review is concerned for early site permits known as ESPs, design certifications known as DCs, and combined licenses referred to as COLs. That process has been exercised to grant 4 early site permits. There's several design certifications that have been issued by the agency, and we just, in the earlier part of this year, brought this process to the culmination of granting 4 combined licenses for large light water reactors. Those first combined licenses were issued to the Southern Company and their partners, and they're building the first of what will be 2 reactors at the Waynesboro, Georgia site. And the second, or I should say the third and fourth of those licenses were issued to SCANA and South Carolina Electric and Gas and their partners to build 2 units at their Jenkinsville, South Carolina location. Construction has started on the first of each of those units at each of those sites, soon to be followed within a year or so by the beginning of construction at the second unit at each of those sites. I also want to mention that certainly the lessons of Fukushima have been taken to heart by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the industry. Insofar as the applications that we have under review for reactors that have yet to be licensed, we have made a commitment to the Commission, which has accepted our obligation, that we will ensure that before licensing the subsequent reactors that we have under review, that we will have addressed all the applicable Fukushima lessons learned and requirements imposed by the Commission before those license activities would be completed. Turning now to slide 3, I want to mention the NRC Advanced Reactor Program. It is a program that is maturing. It has not quite come to fruition yet. The responsibility for that program from a project management standpoint is housed in something called the Division of Advanced Reactors and Rulemaking. What is being focused on at this point in time is to ensure that the regulatory infrastructure that would permit the timely review of an application for a small modular reactor or any other advanced reactor would be available for use at such time that an application would be offered to us. I should make a distinction that our focus is will first be placed upon what we refer to as small modular reactors known as integral pressurized water reactors. That's the technology that is closely allied with the technology that's employed for large light water reactors, so it's obvious that that's the one that we are going to focus on first in terms of developing the regulatory infrastructure that would allow us to promptly begin the review of those applications when they arrived. We are talking with certain of the potential vendors of that class of reactors, and we are developing review standards that take a step beyond the standard review plan that was utilized to review the large light water reactors and tailor some of those review standards to reflect the unique characteristics of these small modular reactors. Jumping back for a moment, if I could go to slide 4, just in terms of a summary with regard to what kind of level of activities involved in the large light water reactor area. We received 18 combined license applications for large light water reactors involving up to almost 30 possible units on the heels of the passage of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. Because of business-related decisions and circumstances surrounding the evolution of the approval for certain of these activities in the last few years, we now have 10 of those original 18 applications that are under active review. The remainder have, in effect, on their choice, asked us to suspend or alter the review of those applications, of those 8 that aren't being looked at this point in time. One applicant in that case decided not to pursue the application as it was originally offered for a combined license and in effect switched his application and interest to an early site permit as opposed to pursuing an application for a specific design for licensing. So in short, we have 10 under active review at this point in time. We also have 3 design certifications applicable to large light water reactors under review at this point in time, and I've listed them on slide 4. And as I referenced earlier, we have early site permits under review. One of them, the Victoria County Station, was originally an application for a combined license for a General Electric ESBWR reactor at that site, which they've now switched to an early site permit, and they've provided us information that if we were to approve it would permit several different reactor designs to be located at that site if it was ultimately approved. Similarly, PSE&G in New Jersey for potential placement of a reactor at their artificial island site or near to it has an ESP into us, and again it also proposes what we call a plant parameter envelope that would encompass several different designs that might already be certified or might be certified in the future. On slide 5, and I apologize, I think, Ben, you're going to have to hit your button like 5 different times because it graphically throws up in order the design certifications that have been referenced in these applications. One is the ABWR, the other is the AP1000, then there's the EPR, and I apologize for these acronyms. They've taken on a life of their own. They did have a definition in past, but most people have started to use them as the terminology to apply to these reactors, and I won't belabor everybody with trying to explain what each of those letters stand for. Another one which I mentioned earlier is the ESBWR, and then there's one known as the US APWR. And those, that graphic displays the locations that have been proposed for the installation and potential operation of each of those designs. And you can sort through which design is being proposed for which location. Going on to slide 6 to discuss the advanced reactor program. I've given you a little bit of introduction that there's a diversity in what we refer to as advanced reactors. There's something referred to as high-temperature gas-cooled reactors. These were being considered seriously by the Department of Energy in the context of what was called their next-generation nuclear plant program. There's small pressurized water reactors, which are the ones that also include what I referred to as the integral PWRs. And I'll just stop there for a moment. Integral in that regard means that unlike these large light water reactors that have a reactor vessel, and then outside of that reactor vessel have something called steam generators and pressurizers, the integral PWRs in effect integrate those major components of the steam supply system in the core into a single vessel. That's why they're referred to as integral or IPWRs. And then there's a class of reactor known as a liquid metal cooled fast reactor, and there's several versions of that that have been proposed within the confines of the United States, and there's several more designs outside of the United States being sponsored by international consortium and vendors that have yet to come to us for indicating any desire to have us certify those designs. But the 4 that I have listed there are ones that we have talked to. The next 3 slides are given with a great deal of detail, not necessarily to be spoken to by me. I wanted to give you an idea of the fact that we have grouped our design review activities for both the design certifications and the associated combined license applications into what we call design-centered review areas or design-centered working groups. So therefore, all of the applications that surround the choice of a given technology or a given vendor's design are treated as a group in terms of my assignment of responsibilities and my assignment of resource and priorities. The other feature of this grouping is the fact that instead of each of those applications being reviewed by this agency in isolation, we have a general policy that I imposed several years ago, which is we do one technical issue review that applies to all of the class of the reactors, so that we only basically have one issue, one review, and one decision, and we don't, in effect, repeat the same review activity for each of the applicants. In effect, they have got to all agree to accept the consequence of the decision we make on the first application designated as the reference combined license. This is a policy decision. It was not something that was, quote, imposed or expected by either the Congress or the Commission. It's one that, in effect, reflected a limited budget, and the fact is, we will review anybody's application, but if they want us to hold to the schedules that we've committed to, they have to play by these rules. It's a little bit of a forced fit to effectuate a benefit for all. Anyway, the last of those slides on slide 9 includes a block dedicated to advanced reactors, and none of those applications, unlike the prior blocks of information, none of those applications have been received yet by the agency, and those predicted schedules and the date of the arrival of those applications are just that. They're predictions based upon information we've received by these potential applicants. So to repeat again, we do not have an advanced reactor application or a small modular reactor application that's been offered to the agency, either from the standpoint of a design certification or of a combined license. And I'll end with that last slide, number 10, which said, based on the fact that we have now, in effect, 4 active construction sites, 2 sites with 2 plants each proposed and now underway. We have a challenge in that the next step of this process has to do with the licensee now, not the applicant, building the plant that the NRC agreed that they could build and gave them approval for. They now have to, in effect, maintain the configuration of that plant consistent with the license that we signed and gave them. That is a major challenge given the variability of construction approaches and construction lessons learned from what's going on in other countries, et cetera. So we are now faced with the challenge of overseeing the construction of a nuclear plant to ensure that it agrees with what we call the licensing basis for that plant. There's a term there that's a term of art used in the industry called ITAC. It's called Inspections, Tests, Analyses, and Acceptance Criteria. I view that as ITAC are given with their license, and they basically are the tests and acceptance criteria that will be used by them to determine that what they built meets their licensing basis. It's the bridge between the construction process and the ultimate decision by the commission to allow them to load fuel and go to operation. And I think I captured the second bullet in my remarks, that we are challenged in overseeing this transition from the initial licensing activity, which we've now put behind us for these 4 plants, and moving into construction and the ultimate potential agreement with the commission that they can load fuel. That second decision, by the way, is not a licensing decision. It is the result of an inspection activity that confirms that the plant has indeed been built as it was proposed. With that, I will stop. I hope I didn't move too quick, but I was in the interest of wanting to retain as much time as for others as possible. I moved quickly, and I'll entertain questions at this point, Ben, or if you'd like to hold them until the latter stages of our discussion, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think I'd like to hold questions till the end after both presentations, but thank you very much. That was extremely helpful. Really sounds like you guys have your hands full over there at the NRC. Before we hear from our second speaker, I would just like to quickly introduce Marshall Cohen. Marshall Cohen is the Senior Director for State and Local Governmental Affairs at the Nuclear Energy Institute, where he manages all the state policy and local outreach initiatives. And I'd also like to personally thank Marshall and his whole team at NEI, who have really been quite helpful in facilitating NCSL's work with members of Congress in advancing key issues of significant importance to state legislators regarding nuclear industry. So Marshall, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everybody. Just briefly, NEI is the national policy organization for the commercial nuclear industry in the United States. And basically anyone who has anything to do with the production of electricity through the nuclear process, the utilities, manufacturers, the training and education of people, universities, community colleges, and a host of others are our members. And we have a very strong ethic of wanting to make sure that public policymakers at all levels know and understand our industry, what we're doing, and make sure that their questions are answered. So we're very appreciative of NCSL doing this webinar. Our organization is a platinum member of the NCSL Foundation. We find it just a terrific organization and a great opportunity to be able to talk to state legislators from around the country. So with that said, it's really an honor to be able to introduce Dr. Catherine Jackson, who is currently the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Westinghouse Electric Company. Westinghouse is one of the world's largest nuclear services company. They are, as Mr. Matthews said, building, it's their design that is being built by the 4 new reactors in Georgia and South Carolina. They also have their new AP1000 design under construction at least 4, and Kate, you can correct me, locations in China. They provide support services of every aspect of the nuclear process worldwide to the existing world fleet of reactors. So they are a strong member of our organization, and we're pleased to have them. Dr. Jackson has a master's degree in industrial engineering management from the University of Pittsburgh and master's and doctorate degrees in engineering and public policy from Carnegie Mellon University. She has served as a postdoctoral fellow at the National Academy of Engineering. And in her work at Westinghouse, she is responsible for leading all of their research and development activities, as well as their environmental sustainability initiatives which is designed to minimize the impact of these kinds of global business activities on the environment. So without any more, please welcome Dr. Kate Jackson.
Well, thank you very much, Marshall, and thank you specifically to Ben and the whole NCSL for the opportunity to talk to you today. I also spent many years at the Tennessee Valley Authority, and so have enormous respect for the work that state legislators do to deliver effective services to all of their constituents across all the states in the United States. It's incredibly important and powerful and very hard work. So I'm just going to do a couple of things. First, I want to briefly talk about what an SMR is, and then talk a little bit about who Westinghouse is, the ongoing Department of Energy program, the team approach that Westinghouse and the team that we participate and lead is having to that DOE program, and then a little bit about the Westinghouse design. So let me just say first that a small modular reactor is less than 300 megawatts. So that compares to a large nuclear plant, which is about 1,100 to 1,700 megawatts. So they're relatively small in our terms. And the challenge is that nuclear plants have been large historically because of the economy of scale, meaning they take lots of capital, they take lots of people to run them, and therefore the bigger you can get them, the cheaper the power will be when it comes out. So the challenge in the world of SMRs is to be able to beat, nope, I'm not on that slide yet, to beat the economy of scale so that you have an opportunity to decrease that capital cost, decrease the number of people it takes to operate them, shorten the construction period, all driving effective economics. And so it's really important for us to address all of those capital cost things, and I will talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Extending the attributes of nuclear power is what we care very much about in the nuclear industry. And really, the issue is providing reliable baseload capacity for ratepayers and for our customers so that they can have low-cost power to serve as the platform on which economic development can be driven. And the positive environmental attributes of nuclear, which is no carbon emissions, no sulfur, no nitrogen emissions, are very, very important. And so being able to develop a reactor that is lower cost, more rapidly constructed, and therefore can appeal to a broader array of customers is crucial. We don't just believe that large nuclear operators, which they're historically, we've got about 100 or 150 customers in the whole world. We can offer these smaller reactors to a whole lot more customers. Municipals and co-ops are very interested in small reactors. They want to diversify their fuel. They want no carbon solution generation. So we need to be able to address the needs of very different market participants than what we have historically. Okay, now I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. So I just want to talk for a moment about Westinghouse. Westinghouse has more than 60 years of nuclear experience. It is the only major nuclear vendor that is 100% nuclear. We don't do anything other than nuclear power, and Marshall has already talked about the kinds of things that we do. But we have dedicated experts in all areas of reactor design, licensing, fuel, operation, plant maintenance. And the AP1000 is the design that we are building 8 units globally. It is licensed in multiple continents, and it is the first and only U.S. licensed large passive safety reactor. Let me just pause a moment and talk about passive safety. So one of the things that David talked about was these small modular reactors are all integral, but in addition, they are all using passive safe concepts. What passive safety means is that in a situation where there is an event at a nuclear plant, the plant will reach and maintain safe shutdown with absolutely no operator interaction. That passive technology depends on things that you and I depend on every day. It's gravity, which pulls water downhill. We all depend on gravity to drive our cars home, to keep our pens on our desks. It depends on convection and natural circulation, I'm right now convecting heat into the room, maybe a little more than I was before I spoke, but convection is a way that a nuclear plant can rid itself of heat that it doesn't want to have without the use of, in an emergency, having extra pumps, valves that have to be operated, diesel generators that have to operate if the system can't get power from off-site, off the nuclear site. All those emergency systems require money, extra pieces and parts, extra maintenance, extra operation. So what Westinghouse did was design a plant, which is the AP1000, the only licensed passive technology plant in the world, in the United States, and we are now building it, the only one that's being built anywhere in the world, and it now uses this licensed technology that we will use in the small modular reactor. So that's really important to us. Next slide. Thank you. So Westinghouse has 14,000 people in 17 countries around the world, and we have a global supply chain which drives and contributes to our ability to provide fuel and services and also construct these AP1000s. But every plant that's built anywhere in the world, jobs are created and sustained here in the United States. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But the important thing about having all of these experts is that they have been instrumental in driving this technology forward over the past 60 years of Westinghouse experience in nuclear, and we're utilizing those experts as we design this plant. We don't just have a little group of design engineers working on a new design. We have people who have 40 years of experience that we are applying directly. In addition, we have lots of experience building nuclear plants, maintaining them all over the globe. About 50% of the world's 440 operating commercial reactors are either Westinghouse design or based on Westinghouse designs, and they're offered by our licensee. And as a result, we know how to deliver these SMRs, eventually SMRs, to countries all over the world. We know how to operate in different regulatory regimes, and that's really crucial for this DOE program that I'll talk about next. So if you go to the next slide. Thank you. The program goals for the DOE SMR program are to deliver these clean energy attributes that are so important to the administration with nuclear, also providing diversity of fuel, and the goal for the DOE program is to have expeditious deployment. That's specifically written in their request. And what that means is that they want a plant to be commercially operating by 2022. I know to many of us that doesn't seem expeditious, but the nuclear world has fairly long development time. So it does take a long time to get plants licensed, which is crucially important. The work that David and his team do is to ensure that these plants are safe, they're well designed, they can be operated safely, is the only reason that nuclear is still a kind of a generation technology that is interesting to customers and acceptable to the public. That's very, very important. So what the DOE is interested in, what the U.S. government and the taxpayers are interested in, is ensuring that not only an SMR will get built somewhere in the United States, but that we in the United States build an industry driven from SMRs. So it's to make sure that the U.S. government is licensing and promulgating technologies and regulations that can lead the world and continue to lead the world in the nuclear business for safe, reliable technology, and ensure that we're handling nuclear materials appropriately. So the expeditious deployment really drives a few things. Proven technologies over innovative technologies. So the fact that we've already licensed passive technology, that we have 60 years of experience with light water reactors, water-moderated reactors. We're not thinking about liquid metal and molten sodium and all kinds of fancy things. This is based on the technology that virtually every commercial power nuclear operation has across the globe. It also means that we have to think very carefully about the cost. So let's go to the next slide, please. The goal is really to provide a U.S. technology that can compete globally. There are several SMR vendors in the United States who are competing. That's appropriate. That drives innovation. It drives lower cost. But importantly, we will be competing with other country companies, and they're combined in other countries. The Koreans, the Chinese, the Russians, they are all developing small modular reactors, so it's crucial that the United States has an offering in that global playing field. So the DOE program is enormously helpful to get us standing with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for licensing, but also provides us opportunities to market these at other places. I'm not going to go through this slide, but basically just there are smaller load growth requirements, less water availability requirements, transmission grid constraints, all that drive toward the need for smaller capacity chunks being purchased by customers, and that's what the small modular reactor can provide. I want to go to the next slide and just talk a minute about the team. One of the important pieces of the DOE program is to have a customer that is actually interested and needs power in this time frame, 2021, 2022. Ameren Missouri is our partner. They are submitting a construction operating license for 5 Westinghouse small modular reactors at their Callaway site. And I just wanted to acknowledge their system, their customers. They will need power as a result of retiring fossil units and relatively modest load growth in the state of Missouri. Next slide, please. We are looking at placing these small modular reactors at Missouri's Callaway Energy Center. There is now 1 operating nuclear reactor there. And people frequently say to me, gosh, you know, think about Fukushima. Aren't people awfully negative about nuclear? In fact, people are very positive on average, particularly in the United States, particularly in Western countries with some exceptions. For nuclear power, and people that live around a nuclear power plant are even more positive about nuclear. The operations of the Callaway site have really put to bed any question that there has been about can you operate it safely, can it be cheap. It has not been online very long. It's actually fairly young for a nuclear plant, but it is 19th in the highest lifetime generation among all of the nuclear power plants worldwide. That's exceptional, and so we are so pleased to have a partner that is that capable. The next slide. It's very important for us to have customers who are participating early on in the design to ensure that the design is operable and maintainable, because we know how to design the core. We know how to design a plant, but the operators know how to design it in a way that will make it cost-effective and safe for years to come. So the key features of the site itself is that it has no flooding issues. It does not have significant seismic issues beyond our current design. It's got very good geology. In addition, they have been pursuing licenses for a nuclear plant there. They have now switched to a small reactor, and so they have lots of data about that site that can move us forward expeditiously, which is that key word. The next slide talks a little bit in more specific about the DOE program. It is a $452 million potential investment for up to 2 designs. The private industry has to bring a 50-50 cost share, so the total investment by the U.S. government and the companies that will participate in this is close to $1 billion. And it's really the vision of this program and our joint team with Ameren Missouri to become the U.S. leader. The reason, you need to switch slides 1, please. Thank you. The reason that it is important, sort of lost my train of thought there for a second, sorry. So our goal is to join together and drive U.S. regulations and U.S. standards forward. And I'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So this partnership really is wonderful because Ameren Missouri has brought together every power producer, power company in the state of Missouri. So lots of municipals and co-ops who want some very different things in comparison with large nuclear operators. And so having that strong state-based support, public power and investor-owned utilities is really important. large skill base for nuclear, a university that provides all kinds of nuclear research experience, but also lots of engineering experience that we can apply to our design process. The next slide talks a little bit about the economic development benefits. That's one of the goals of the DOE program, is to ensure that we are delivering jobs. We had an independent firm look at the job creation from one SMR built at the Callaway site. We estimate about $3 billion in 15 states, and I'll show a slide in a little bit about kind of the spread of some of that supply chain, and stimulate 9,500 direct jobs and about 9,000 indirect jobs. Really important. This is going to be a completely U.S.-made SMR. In addition, when you build a large nuclear plant, you go to that country or the state, and you bring a global supply chain. In the case of the small modular reactor, these are modules. The plant will be built in factory and then shipped almost like Legos to site and assembled at site. That's very different, and what that means is that in the United States, in Missouri, we can build a factory and supply the world with Westinghouse small modular reactors. Go to the next slide, please. We are really pushing, utilizing our existing licensed technology, things that we know, putting it together in an innovative way, licensing it rapidly, and getting to market very fast. So we will submit, and you heard Dave say that nobody submitted an SMR design certification application yet. We will be the first ones. We will submit next early fall, late summer of next year, 2013, and then the NRC staff will work with us jointly to ensure that this plant is as safe as it can possibly be. And then Ameren Missouri will submit a construction operating license a year after that in 2014. On the next slide, now you see the actual plant. The goal is to make this plant in a factory in pieces like Legos and ship them to site either by rail, barge, or truck. So the goal to make the capital costs decrease is to get all the productivity and quality of factory build and then ship it, which means that you've got to ship pieces that are in that sort of envelope of about 12 or 13 feet. That requires that your design is as small as possible but has maximum capacity. So the capacity for the Westinghouse SMR is 225 megawatts. And you heard a little bit about integral reactors. So when you look at a traditional reactor, you have a core reactor vessel, you got big pipes coming out of it, big pumps attached to those pipes, big steam generators which take the heat and turn it into steam that turns the turbine. In this integral reactor, we've put it all together inside a reactor vessel, put it in a containment structure that's very small, and that entire capsule that you see is buried. So it has additional anti-terrorism, anti-external threat defense. And all the SMRs are integral. All of them are embedded in the ground. The next slide. Thank you. So you now can see that little capsule down underground. And it is a very small footprint. A traditional nuclear plant is about 60 to 90 acres. The Westinghouse SMR is about 15 acres. And it is the most capacity that you can get out of a plant for its size, which suggests that it will be the most economic SMR. Now, I talked about passive safety. In the case of Fukushima, if the plants there in Japan had been Westinghouse AP1000s with this passive technology, those plants would have shut down, remained in safe shutdown condition, and had no core damage and no off-site radiation release. And the AP1000 can reach that safe shutdown and remain that way for 3 days. The Westinghouse SMR extends that to 7 days of passive safety. So no operator interaction in an event for 7 days, and 100% reliance on those natural passive forces. The spent fuel pool is underground, so there's everything here that is for the nuclear island, we call it, is embedded. Okay, next slide. This is just basically says that we've got lots of design experience. We have more certified designs there than we've talked about. The passive safety systems are incredibly important, and they're proven. It took us about 20 years to license these passive safety systems on 3 continents. And so, those technologies are fundamental to our ability to deliver a safe, reliable, low-cost small modular reactor. Next slide. This is the supply chain slide that I noted. So when I talked about the $3 billion in 15 states, that it's not limited to 15 states. There are about 40 states here that have nuclear supply chain that Westinghouse depends upon for its global business, but certainly for its Westinghouse business. And next slide. So our product design really drives from the leveraging all of the experience that we have. Our goal in the SMR program is to get the most power with the least amount of material, therefore the most competitive, and have a short construction schedule, which is about 24 months. That's very similar to a gas combustion combined cycle. In addition, this plant can load follow, meaning for the variable resources like wind, solar, price responsive demand, it can be the shock absorber. That fuel that can load follow is already licensed. Again, that's a very long time horizon project. You can see the picture there is one of the plants that is the AP1000 plants under construction in China, and those are modular plants. About 30% of it is modularized. In the SMR case, about 90% will be. The next slide. The rest of our team I didn't mention is Burns & McDonnell, also a Missouri company that's doing lots of architect engineering work. General Dynamics Electric Boat, they are a Navy nuclear, they build submarines. Turns out that a submarine is about the same size as the Westinghouse small modular reactor, and many of the modular capabilities that build submarines are very similar to those that we need and are currently using in the SMR. In addition, we have the Next Start customer group, which has about 15 additional customers in addition to Ameren that are bringing lots of experience, capabilities, and challenges to our design to make it better. And we are depending upon them to help us deliver a cost-effective SMR. The next slide. You can see the Next Start Alliance there. It has companies that have been traditional nuclear companies like Exelon, First Energy, and Kansas City Power and Light, but also some new ones that are helping us think through what munis and co-ops might be interested in, like Tampa Electric, like Associated Electric, the Municipal Power Authority, but also Savannah River Nuclear Lab, who is very interested in utilizing an SMR for things like burning waste to the extent that it's possible, maybe utilizing mixed oxide fuel, which is important to them. Okay, next slide. So the summary is just that there's this unprecedented alliance that is driving this forward, very strong political and policy support, and lots of opportunity for us to look for job benefit for the SMR. In the case of the AP1000, these units, the 8 units that we are currently building, positively influence about 35,000 jobs in the United States for that global activity. So with that, I'm going to stop and hope there are questions.
Thank you. The floor is now open for questions. If you have a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time. Questions will be taken in the order they are received. If at any time your question has been answered, you can remove yourself from the queue by pressing 1. If you're using a speakerphone, we ask that while posing your question, you pick up your handset to provide favorable sound quality. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions or comments, please press *1 on your telephone keypad at this time. Please hold while we poll for questions.
All right, well, while we wait for those folks to hit *1, one question that I actually got over the chat function that actually came from two different folks. I'm going to try and combine the questions into one. Was what really are the opportunities, and I guess I should mention this is for Dr. Jackson, Marshall, and David. What are really the opportunities for state legislatures that they can really engage in to kind of take advantage of these new technologies as SMRs move forward and as the NRC continues to approve new, larger plants?
Well, I'll jump in a little bit. This is Marshall Cohen. States can have a variety of roles, I think, in looking at how to incentivize putting together the kind of consortium that Dr. Jackson talked about. I can tell you, for example, that policies with respect to construction work in progress in Georgia have knocked $1 billion or so off the cost of the new reactors being built in Georgia, and have been, I think, an important part of how that project and proposal was put together by the Southern Company and its partners, Georgia Power, and then its suppliers, Westinghouse and Shaw. So there are ideas of incentivizing through expedited permitting, depending upon how the state or local permitting systems are set up. Various tax benefits, credits, incentives for high wages. There's just any number of sort of things that, and states can be creative, as we all know. That's one of the great things about states looking at these kinds of things. So I think there are a number of opportunities that would warrant discussion, as I think Westinghouse entered into, certainly with Governor Nixon and the policymakers in Missouri. I think that's an open field, and our organization would be more than happy to help contribute whatever we can to those discussions and ideas going forward.
David or Dr. Jackson, did you have anything to add?
No, I think the only thing that I would add is that, beyond maybe economic development, tax incentive kind of things, there are also, because every state has a PUC or some sort of regulatory body, those groups are often intensely focused on things like reliability, cost, diversity of fuel supply. So making sure that we are all thinking through about all of the opportunities, benefits, and challenges that there are with all resources that we utilize and connect to the grid is incredibly important. And there's no better place for that objective perspective to be brought to the fore to ensure that we are making these trade-offs appropriately, not for the short term, but for the long term, because many customers of ours, of course, are publicly traded, and what that drives is relatively near-term focus, and I understand that, but the states also have an opportunity to ensure that we are making the right decisions for the long term with respect to energy policy.
And this is David. I'll just add that from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission standpoint, there's two realms in which the state can get involved. Certainly, the NRC has the authority and withholds the authority to make the final decisions associated with reactor radiological safety. That process, however, has many opportunities for public involvement, including interaction with the states. But the other side of the NRC's responsibility relates to implementing the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act. And those requirements and some other statutory requirements, put the states in a position that they have many approvals that need to be in place and granted to a potential applicant or potential licensees, that in the absence of those approvals, the NRC can't move forward. So there are opportunities at the state level for, quote, streamlining or facilitating the state approval processes that involve their departments of environmental protection, as they might be described in different states, and the interactions with the EPA, with the Corps of Engineers that relate to land usage and environmental impacts, where state involvement and approvals are necessary in order for us to ultimately issue a license. Some of them are statutory in that we can't issue a license until a state takes a certain action. So the streamlining and integration of those state approval and review processes is one way that the state can get involved, but also that can facilitate the rapidity with which these reviews can be completed.
Yeah, and Ben, this is Marshall. I'll add one other thought out. you may see, I suspect that as the SMRs get certified designs and start to appear, you may see some creative models out there and how they are brought into to being, if you will, and not so much a traditional model of a utility building and operating, installing, but I can envision, and this comes from conversations that I have around the country with legislators and others, I can envision a small town, a rural town somewhere, partnering with the state, contracting with the utility to operate a small reactor that is built by Westinghouse, but the ownership may be the community because of the value of the power that it's getting and the purpose that you can do it. I think the small reactors have an incredible potential of flexibility of deployment, this is the awkward term I use, but as to where they can be used and in what kind of circumstances and what their primary need is for providing power, and possibly with leftover power going up to the grid. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of creativity in another few years on this.
No, I really agree there, Marshall. And you actually kind of jumped to the next question I was going to ask. I actually have a couple questions over the web, so I'll just read them off. And Marshall, you did kind of answer this question already. But really the question just gets at kind of what are some of the best uses for SMRs given their lower output, which I believe, Dr. Jackson, you said was 225 megawatts. I may be misstating that. But basically the question was, you know, and as Marshall talked about, you know, partnering with rural townships, but really just some of the best uses given their lower level of output.
Yeah, so an SMR, you're exactly right, the Westinghouse design, and if you only quote all about Westinghouse, I'm fine with that. You can be my marketing arm. Is 225 megawatts, but an SMR is defined in the U.S. as being less than 300 megawatts. So the range is really 40 to 225 of the four competitors that there are. And so the opportunities are for places where you don't need 1,000 or 1,100 or 1,500 megawatts at a pop. And so for retiring fossil units is a really good opportunity potentially, recognizing that many of those were built in the 50s and 60s. They are on the order of 150 to 200 megawatts. So when you take and retire one of those, you need something, maybe not in exactly the same location, but as far as the grid is concerned, in the same location to support voltage. So when we have, you know, the potentially massive retirement of those old 50s and 60s fossil units, that's a critical place. Another and probably first place will be like at the Callaway site in Missouri, traditional nuclear operators who have some extra space at one of their already operating nuclear power plants to put an SMR or two or five. And then longer term, beyond that, would be things like combined heat and power, potentially for large petrochemical companies, people that want to be off the grid. There's Eastman Chemical has talked to us quite a bit. They make their own power with gas turbines right now, but they're thinking about long-term, obviously not right now with gas prices the way they are, but long-term looking at maybe using nuclear. Aluminum providers have talked with us. And then enhanced oil recovery just with the heat of the steam. When you look at nuclear power, it's about 30 to 35% efficient, which means if you have a 225 megawatt electric nuclear plant, you have 3 times that much in megawatt equivalent steam. If you had a 1,000 megawatt plant, you'd have 3,000 megawatts of steam. So that's too much for enhanced oil recovery. That's just too much steam for them to handle. But a small modular reactor provides that opportunity. Or very remote places like northern Canada, Alaska, that are too remote, and right now they're flying in their diesel fuel for diesel generators. So, you know, the cost picture looks pretty positive for a small modular reactor. And clearly other countries, there are lots of opportunities. One of our customers in China they're working on a design of their own, but they intend to build between 200 and 300 small modular reactors. Remember, I said there are 440 operating reactors worldwide right now.
Wow. David, this question actually came in earlier, and I just want to make sure gets asked and answered. You mentioned the recent approvals of the plants in Georgia and South Carolina, including the API 1000, and I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly from one of your earlier slides, you mentioned there were 8 active applications. And the question was really just, given the recent approvals and the active applications, whether or not you and the NRC were expecting kind of a rise or an increase in applications kind of going forward.
Well, I can let Dave speak to the NRC's perspective. Right now we are building these 4 units in the United States, 4 units in China. There are several other customers who either are talking to us about contracts or have a contract but have deferred it for some period of time. The challenge isn't whether nuclear is ready. The challenge is load growth. So load growth has gone down with the economic downturn, so that need for power has been pushed out in time. In addition, the economics are such that it's difficult to think about nuclear plants when you can get $2 gas. And so companies that are unregulated, meaning that they're on the marketplace, probably will not be moving forward with nuclear in the short term. We all know that $2 gas isn't going to stay $2 gas forever, but you need about $7 equivalent for gas for nuclear to be in the money just on the marketplace. And so, I think there won't be a rush to nuclear just because we've got these plants being built now, but it clearly is an enormous vote of confidence, not just from the NRC, from the financial institutions, and from those customers that have decided to purchase it. Now, our responsibility is to keep the operating plants operating safely and then build these on cost and schedule.
From the Nuclear Regulatory Commission standpoint, while I think we anticipated a higher number of these applicants to turn to construction upon their receipt of the combined license than we see at the present time, we're still pursuing the review of their applications on the schedules that we had originally expected and predicted, provided they still have the wherewithal and the commitment to provide us the information we need to bring these reviews to closure, irrespective of whether they're going to immediately turn to start building one of these plants. As you can imagine, as Dr. Jackson very well explained, the circumstances surrounding the likelihood or the ability of a given entity to begin building a plant upon receipt of their COL has changed drastically. That's why from those original 18 applications, we only have 10 at this present time under active review. So that number's gone down, and the 10 have a varying level of commitment and ability to support our ongoing review of the applications, but a significant number of them are still pursuing them assiduously. So we expect to keep working on them. To some degree, I'll say the benefit, if you want to put it that way, to the SMR activities is the fact that there has been this downturn, and we have moved from 18 applications under active review to 10, in that allows us some resource flexibility to do the work we need to get ready for the SMRs, which frankly, that work wasn't on the horizon when we initially started into this new reactor review activity. So there's been some balancing of resources that allowed us to apply some resources that had been loosened up by the downturn in the number of active applications of large light water reactors, to be able to devote our technical and review resources to the activities which are now in front of us and potentially will give us a few applications to review in the next couple of years in the small modular reactor area.
And we're hoping to keep the NRC extremely busy.
And we're hoping to be able to respond to your expectations. But there is an issue there, as you well know, with regard to the continuing commitment of Congress to provide us the resources necessary to do that and the time frame that you're looking for. And so it is a circumstance that even though we're a fee recovery agency, our authorization to devote resources to these activities is something that still ultimately comes from Congress, even though the ultimate bill for the review is paid for by the applicants.
Let me just check back in to make sure there were no questions on the phone, or see if there were any questions on the phone.
No, sir. There are no questions at this time.
All right. Well, with that, that concludes today's webinar on new nuclear energy technology. I would personally, once again, like to thank David Matthews of the NRC and Dr. Jackson of Westinghouse for presenting here and taking some questions. For those that joined late, or for those that would like to listen again, I will be posting a replay of today's webinar online early next week. If you would like me to directly email you a copy, please send me an email first at ben.husch@ncsl.org. And again, for those that have not done so already, I would highly encourage you to register for NCSL's 2012 Legislative Summit, which is in Chicago, August 6th through 9th, where both the Agriculture and Energy Committee as well as the Environment Committee will be updating NCSL's policies on nuclear waste management. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Thanks.